What's going on, everybody? RJ Ochoa here from SB Nation's bloggingtheboys.com. Hope all is well wherever you are. Hope you're happy, safe, healthy, and want to wish you a very happy Tuesday, January the 14th, 2025. It is officially the 1 year anniversary of the Dallas Cowboys losing, getting destroyed, getting humbled, getting embarrassed by the Green Bay Packers in the wild card round of last year's playoffs. In case you didn't remember, 2024 was a leap year, which is why it took an extra day for this to be the case. Today is a very annoying day and will be for a very long time, just like the next couple of days, next couple of weeks seemingly will be for the Cowboys as they are looking for a new head coach. This is my first live stream since the Cowboys moved on, parted ways, whatever the parlance is right now relative to Mike McCarthy. Did have a video that went up on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel where hopefully you are able to watch this. I do believe that I have all the functionality going. In case you're new around here, I am live in the Bleacher Report app and on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. So make sure you're watching live. If you can't watch live, obviously, make sure you catch the rewatch on demand. You can follow me in the Bleacher Report app right down below if you're on that side of things. Obviously, you can subscribe to the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. You can follow me on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at RJ Ochoa. All right, so we have a coaching search to discuss because the Dallas Cowboys obviously decided to move on from Mike McCarthy on Monday. If you want to call it their decision, obviously there are a few ways to go about that. There are a few different opinions on that. I would imagine relative to if you're asking Mike McCarthy, who is set to interview, by the way, with the Chicago Bears tomorrow on Wednesday. And although there is not a reported day yet as to when Mike McCarthy will interview with the New Orleans Saints, that is expected to be happening sometime next week. Let's take a look as we kind of set the stage for the discussion that we're about to have. This is our Dallas Cowboys head coach tracker over at bloggingtheboys.com. You can see all my work over there. What we're doing, if it isn't obvious, is we're letting you know each and every single thing, each and every brand new piece of information that is coming out relative to the Cowboys. I do see you be kind to each other on the YouTube side of things. If you can let me know if you're hearing everything properly, that would be wonderful. Obviously, we've had some technical issues in the past getting off the ground there, but I think that we're good. Anyway, this needs to be read in ascending order if you want to go from oldest to newest. So the thing at the very top is obviously the most recent thing relative to the Dallas Cowboys and their look for a head coach. We obviously discussed Mike McCarthy and how he is going to be interviewing with the Chicago Bears on Wednesday, but has interest from the New Orleans Saints, as mentioned. As it relates to the Cowboys and their position, immediately after the Mike McCarthy news, Ian Rappaport mentioned that the Cowboys missed out on the early windows for the Lions and the Chiefs. And in case you didn't hear this, I think you be kind to each other for letting know you can hear everything perfectly. In case you didn't know, I mentioned this in the video that I did and on some social videos I did as well, which is why you should follow me on social media. The Cowboys, there was some confusion on this. There was some gray area. The Cowboys did not obviously interview any of the Detroit Lions or Kansas City Chiefs coordinators last week when those two teams were on bye. Because they did not do that, the Dallas Cowboys now, even though they're now looking for a new head coach, can't interview them. That's part of the NFL rules. Obviously, the Lions and Chiefs each have a divisional round playoff game, and obviously we all expect them to do well and seemingly advance to the Super Bowl. Maybe that's your Super Bowl pick, Lions and Chiefs, whatever the case may be. The Cowboys now cannot talk to them until either after the Super Bowl or until after their seasons end. Obviously, if the Lions were to lose on Saturday night or the Chiefs, obviously earlier in the day, they would be free to speak with them as soon as the season is over for either team. But it should be mentioned that all these teams who did do these virtual interviews with, call it Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or Steve Spagnuolo and Matt Nagy, if that's your cup of tea, all these teams who did virtually interview those specific candidates can hold second interviews with them between January 27th and February the 2nd, which obviously is after the conference championships and prior to the Super Bowl. The Dallas Cowboys cannot, and this is where that gray area was. The reason is because the Cowboys were not among the teams who conducted the virtual interview last week. So the Dallas Cowboys, and this was discussed and outlined all day on Monday. The Bleacher Report app did a phenomenal job sending all these alerts and curating all this information together. The Dallas Cowboys really stepped in it with all of this by delaying the Mike McCarthy decision as much as they did. So that was one of the things that Ian Rappaport noted. Kellen Moore's name has obviously been floated out. And the only other names that have been mentioned to date, which is why you see them on our tracker here, are Jason Witten, which I guess we'll get to in a moment. Deion Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, which is a whole different thing. And earlier on Tuesday, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler, he didn't quite say that Pete Carroll was an option, but he mentioned that Pete Carroll had spent some time with the Raiders, and he noted that Pete Carroll could be on the Cowboys' radar. So that's not necessarily, saying he's an option for the Cowboys as much as he's saying that Pete Carroll could be an option, which is just kind of stating the obvious. Now, I was inspired by something that I saw over at Bleacher Report. Shout out to Christopher Knox. This is best and worst head coaching fits for the Cowboys after parting ways with Mike McCarthy. And that's what we're here to discuss. We're here to discuss the best possible ideas, the worst possible ideas, kind of the chalk ideas. There's a whole lot to kind of examine relative to this overall idea and overall setup because, well, let's be straight up. The Dallas Cowboys are kind of horrible at this. And to refresh your mind, in case you don't know, the last time the Dallas Cowboys were looking for a head coach was obviously 5 years ago after Jason Garrett. They interviewed two singular candidates. I know that's an oxymoron, but they interviewed Marvin Lewis, and that did satisfy the Rooney Rule, and then Mike McCarthy, and he obviously got the job. And so it did sort of seem like they wanted Mike McCarthy from the very beginning. And if you think about this, and I do think that this is important context, Mike McCarthy obviously was one of two candidates who the Cowboys interviewed in the 2020 cycle. He got the job. If we rewind the clock to the time prior to that when the Cowboys were last looking for a head coach, it was after the 2010 season. Obviously, they fired Wade Phillips in the middle of that season, the only time in Jerry Jones's era of ownership that he's fired a head coach before the season ultimately ended. So how did that end? Well, the interim who took over in 2010 was promoted full-time in 2011 in Jason Garrett. So that wasn't quite the, democratic coaching search, if you want to call it that. So if we go all the way back, then when was the last time they hired a head coach before that, before Jason Garrett got the job full-time in 2011? It was 2007 when Bill Parcells walked away after the 2006 season. The Cowboys did at that point in time. And to be very clear here, we're talking about 2007, which I know feels like 10 years ago. It was actually 18 years ago. It was a full adult lifetime ago. The last time the Dallas Cowboys conducted what I would call a proper coaching search. They did interview, obviously, Wade Phillips and Ron Rivera and Norv Turner. Norv Turner actually wound up getting the Chargers job that time. If you recall, it was an interesting time in the NFL. They'd moved on from Marty Schottenheimer after those back-to-back successful seasons. But that being said, even though the Cowboys did conduct a proper search in 2007, and even though they hired Wade Phillips, if you did not remember, or if you're a younger fan, what I'm about to say really did happen. In 2007, the Dallas Cowboys hired Jason Garrett before they hired Wade Phillips. Yes, they hired their offensive coordinator and then went and hired Wade Phillips and obviously said, well, if you take the job, Jason Garrett's going to be your offensive coordinator. It was very obvious from 2007 beyond that Jason Garrett was going to be the future head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, a prophecy that became true in 2011, as we mentioned. So my point in rehashing all of that history before we get to these candidates is that it is not a common thing for the Cowboys to kind of wipe the slate clean. They always have some sort of crossover. Even if you go back to the beginning of the Mike McCarthy era, he didn't get a chance to have whoever he wanted be his offensive coordinator. He inherited Kellen Moore. Yes, he ultimately, whatever you want to call it, won a power struggle, got him to move on, got the Cowboys to move on, whatever the case may be, and did ultimately have 2 years without Kellen as the offensive coordinator and as the play caller. But the reality is the Cowboys did still make sure that some semblance of the past rippled into the present, and they would be wise to move beyond that sort of disposition in this current moment. And as much as I love Mike Zimmer or think that Mike Zimmer did a great job over the second half of the season, because I'm well on record with what I thought across the majority of it all, it would be wise, like I said, of them to let whoever they're going to pick ultimately do something that they want and not contaminate it in any way, shape, or form. I mentioned, obviously, the ideal candidates. I've broken these down into three sort of categories. We all know the kind of archetype or fun little internet game: neutral good, chaotic evil, whatever the case may be. This sort of felt like that to me. And this is how I feel the candidates ultimately shake out. Maybe you disagree with the way that I've categorized them here. I've got three categories. I've got good realistic, I've got bad realistic, and I've got feels impossible. Now, there are some names clearly that I don't have on this list. I don't have Ron Rivera. I don't have, John Gruden. I don't have, I mean, pick who you want that obviously you don't see on this list. These are names that made some sense, that feel somewhat chalk relative to what's possible, relative to what the Dallas Cowboys could actually pull off, which is why, again, they're on my list. So good realistic. These are names that I don't feel great about all of them, to be very clear here, but this is a down cycle. There are not a lot of great options in the pool. And so it's important to kind of recognize that. And you'll note that Ben Johnson is not in here, and neither is Joe Brady. I would be intrigued by those hires. Certainly Ben Johnson goes without saying, but those don't feel practical, which is why I didn't feel, genuine and proper putting them in this category. Kellen Moore, I put him as good realistic, as much as I really don't want to see that, because I think that there are worse ways the franchise could go. So we're obviously starting off on quite the foot, and starting off with quite the, momentum. I see you, David Smith. Says Aaron Glenn is my hope. You'll see I have Aaron Glenn at the bottom of the good realistic category here. And I think that Aaron Glenn is a nice option. Former Cowboy, just like Kellen Moore. There's a lot of former Cowboys who are on the market and potential options. It really is amazing. There's almost more former Cowboys as head coaching candidates for the Cowboys than there are number one color analysts across the NFL and television these days, which I never would have thought would have been the case, but I digress. That being said, Kellen Moore, I can live with. That's what I mean by good realistic. Brian Flores, I'm interested in. I'm not a fan, generally speaking. I don't think anybody really is. I'm going with a defensive-minded head coach. Obviously, that applies to Aaron Glenn as well. This is an offensive-driven league. If you have a defensive-minded head coach, your great offensive coordinator, even if you find the best one, is ultimately going to move on whenever they find a job, and you're going to be kind of stuck resetting at the, one of the most important spots on your overall team. Who knows, on a 2-year basis, maybe, if you're lucky. So that being said, these are, I know I titled it good realistic, but these are really like, the best realistic and practical options. The word good is doing a lot of work here. I recognize that. And I don't mean that, with any disrespect towards any of these candidates, but Pete Carroll, I've put here. Pete Carroll kind of feels like Mike McCarthy 2.0, right? Like Super Bowl winner, maybe culture setter, whatever. Obviously what he did in Seattle speaks for itself. I mean, you could do worse. Like, that's why I've got Pete Carroll here. Now, I see on the YouTube side of things, Jake Benisiman, hope I'm getting that correctly, pronounced correctly, says Deion should be good realistic. Kellen should be bad realistic. I don't have a problem putting Kellen in the bad realistic category. I want nothing to do with Deion Sanders as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Now, to be clear, as a content creator for, around this team, I don't know that I would ever sleep again if Deion Sanders was the head coach of this team. And I'm not coming at this from that perspective. On one hand, it would be very interesting. And on one hand, it would be entertaining. There's no denying that. And I'm not going to sit here and deny what Deion has done at the collegiate level. My take on this isn't Deion can't do it, right? I feel like most people who've offered these takes and authored them have had to eat their fair share of crow, despite the fact that, Deion lost out to my Arizona State Sun Devils in the Big 12, although Deion is a fan of my guy, Kenny Dillingham. He's got a proof of concept, right? Like, you can certainly I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not worried about the Shador element or aspect of it all. If you're somebody who believes that Deion is going to become the head coach of the Cowboys, and then they're going to trade away Dak Prescott and, find some way to get up in the top 3 or top 2 or the number 1 overall pick in the name of drafting Shador Sanders, you're beyond the point of reason. And I really hope that at some point you can pay attention to the wonderful people at Bleacher Report, and hopefully myself at Blogging the Boys, and understand the practical nature of what is happening here, because that isn't within the realm of possibility. I would also offer that I don't even think that Deion is possible, because he's got more juice going on right now than Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones has more juice than most people, as evidenced by the fact that everyone in the whole world is talking about this, and not, the 8 teams who are left standing in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. That's just kind of the straw that stirs the drink, to use the Joneses parlance. But Deion comes in and represents a threat to that attention in a way that Mike McCarthy never did, in a way that Jason Garrett never did, certainly Wade Phillips. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Maybe Bill Parcells had some cachet, but certainly not in the same way. But nevertheless, I do think he is a somewhat mildly realistic option. I just don't know how that works out for you. I think right now, and I will say, look, there is a chance, there's a lottery ticket chance it works out, wonderfully. And, everyone who's in on the Deion thing gets to sit here and say, I told you so. I just would bet against that personally. And that obviously isn't any sort of doubt about what Deion is able to do. David Smith says, pretty sure the Deion thing is just clickbait. I don't disagree. I agree with most people who say that it's an effort to up his salary at Colorado and obviously have the Cowboys generate some positive attention around themselves. Jake adds on the YouTube side of things, Deion is one of the few men on planet Earth, forget coaches, that can handle the job and what comes with it. He can handle Jerry Jones and his meddling. Nobody else on this list can. I agree with you. And this was actually talked about on Get Up today, on Tuesday. And I know that I'm not saying anything that any of us don't know. It is fundamentally dumb. Just so we're clear, it is actually fundamentally stupid that literally the entire world can come to the realization and conclusion that there are a lot of stupid things involved with being the head coach of this team, and that the people in charge, or more specifically the person in charge, won't change it. Like, that's kind of dumb, right? Like, like it's kind of dumb that we're all able to understand this, and that in spite of it, in spite of everyone understanding that this creates a chaotic, dysfunctional, I would offer toxic work environment, one that is not conducive to success, that is conducive to failure, I would argue, that status quo is never changed. I digress. That being said, back to the bad realistic options. I haven't touched on the two Jasons here. I have Jason Garrett listed. There hasn't been any chatter about that, although he was on Kevin Clark's podcast and was asked about the role and whatnot. I am just going to say this. This isn't like a insider thing. This isn't anything. This is just RJ's bold prediction. And I told this to my friends Maggie Gray and Andrew Perloff like 5 months ago when I was on their show. I said back then, I said, if Mike McCarthy's not the head coach of the Cowboys, my bold prediction is that Jason Garrett gets an interview. And we're not there yet, but we are in a world where Rex Ryan is like begging to be the head coach of the New York Jets. And I'm not saying this is an apples to apples situation, but tell me, whoever you are, tell me that you cannot, if you saw the headline, if I told you the headline from the future was insert whatever NFL insider you want here, tweeting out the Dallas Cowboys are going to interview Jason Garrett. Jerry Jones believes he has learned a lot about the modern trends of the league in his time in television at NBC. Tell me that that's impossible, because I don't think you can. And again, there's no chatter to this point. You didn't see him on our tracker at Blogging the Boys about Jason Garrett, so I don't think there's any real need to panic. But I'm going to leave it under bad realistic, because I cannot say that it is impossible. Now, bad realistic, like, the top of this for me is Jason Witten. And I'm going to take this off your screen here, because I cannot believe, I truly, absolutely cannot believe that Jason Witten is in the running for the Dallas Cowboys head coaching position. And I am so mad at the Cowboys, and I think we all should be, because they are putting me in this spot where I have to say things that are seemingly unkind to Jason Witten, one of my favorite players of all time, one of your favorite players of all time, right? I would imagine 48 hours ago, you didn't have a bad thing to say about Jason Witten. We still don't have a bad thing to say about Jason Witten, to make that perfectly clear. The bad thing sounds like, there's just no way that this makes sense, that this is a horrible idea. To be very clear, to be perfectly clear, to be crystal clear with all of you, with all of us, Jason Witten has never coached at the collegiate or professional level. He has coached in high school. I'm not disputing that there is value in that. I'm not even denying that someday Jason Witten could be an incredible NFL head coach, could be an incredible collegiate head coach. Although now that I think about it and kind of talk about this out loud, if you think about it, and I don't have a story pulled up, but I do believe that Jason Witten was in the running for the Tennessee job when the Greg Schiano stuff happened. Let me see. Tennessee head coach. I believe that he was connected to that job when it was kind of going around. And if you search Jason Witten right now, it's impossible, obviously, to find anything, because, everything is about him, obviously. Let's see here. No, I thought there was something about Jason Witten being connected to that Tennessee job. And anything you Google right now is all about Jason Witten and the Cowboys. Now, some comments on YouTube. The other _AJ says Kellen Moore feels like Jason Garrett 2.0. I agree with you, which is unfortunate that Kellen Moore's catching that straight. David Smith says, yeah, I want nothing to do with Pete Carroll. I think Pete Carroll is a wonderful option, only because the alternatives are now Jason Witten or Kellen Moore or Deion Sanders, right? Like, in that world, Pete Carroll makes all the sense in the world. But I will say this, and there's enough chatter out there from insiders and people who I trust enough. Shout out to Joe Hoyt of DLLS. Obviously, Jason Witten's name has been mentioned by Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter. I would bet 5 jelly beans that Jason Witten is on this staff. It seems there is way too much smoke here to not believe that the Dallas Cowboys want Jason Witten on the team in some capacity. I cannot, though, express just how much I fundamentally disagree with this. And again, the things that I'm about to say, I mean with absolutely, please believe me, no ill will towards Jason Witten, who I hold in the highest regard. I've interviewed Jason Witten a handful of times. He's always been a wonderful, perfect gentleman. He's always been incredible. He was obviously always an incredible teammate, an incredible player. I cannot say enough kind things about him, and everything that I'm about to say has nothing to do with who Jason Witten is. It has everything to do with the way the Cowboys are seemingly handling this, or at least dropping breadcrumbs in the way that they could potentially handle this. A hire of Jason Witten is nothing but a perpetuating of the idea that you operate out of a spirit of nepotism. That's all it is. That's all it is. If we think about the people that are connected to this job right now, and I'll put this list up on the screen for you right now. These are names that have been tossed out to varying degrees. I would offer, though, that Brian Flores hasn't really been. Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson obviously haven't been because the Cowboys can't literally interview them. Joe Brady hasn't been. But Kellen Moore, Jason Witten, Deion Sanders are names that have actually been said by various NFL insiders, people who know the league, people who cover the league, people who have connections across and within the league, and all three of them played for the Dallas Cowboys. This incestual nature of just having people who worked for you, who coached for you, who you know, who you understand, isn't working. You've got to think outside the box. The Mike McCarthy hire was smart and was important in that sense. Did it work out? No. Was he horrible and terrible? No. Also, I don't know why this revisionist history is going on with Mike McCarthy like he was some burn that the Cowboys held for the last 5 years. But that's a different subject for a different time, a different day in the offseason when we don't have more important priorities going on. If you were to hire Jason Witten in any capacity right now, it would suggest nothing but that you want him around. And again, I don't mean to minimize or diminish his qualifications because he has them at a high school level. I will give him, and I think we all should give him, an immense amount of credit for doing that. It isn't easy, even if it's not college, even if it's not the NFL. Jason Witten is by all measures a wonderful human being who, again, has all the potential in the world to be a phenomenal collegiate or NFL head coach. But I want you to remember that we're talking about somebody whose coaching resume at this point in time, we all understand that he spent forever in the NFL. We all understand that he has played more games for the Dallas Cowboys than anybody in franchise history. I'm also not minimizing the value in that, in being a player in the NFL. We can all point to many examples of different coaches who were players and they've parlayed that experience into wonderful coaching experiences and successes and things like that. There is value in that. Nobody is denying it. However, to bring all of this back to earth, Jason Witten, once again, has no NFL coaching experience, has no collegiate coaching experience, and yet is being connected to the Dallas Cowboys, not just in general, but for their head coach. Like, nobody's out here saying or reporting, Jason Witten could be like an offensive coordinator or a tight ends coach. That would still be, a little whatever, but at the very least, it would make kind of, some sense, right? Like, we don't have to try really hard to connect those dots, but to say this dude who's coaching high school ball right now could just walk in and be the head coach of this team is a ridiculous leap. It's insulting and offensive to logic and conventional reason and wisdom. And what's more is it's not just that these players, or this specific player in this particular instance, has no collegiate or NFL head coaching experience, which was the case for Kellen Moore, by the way, although his first position was the team's quarterback coach, which he held for a year before getting the offensive coordinator gig. I suppose you could argue that that has worked out, and that would be somewhat of a precedent for this whole phenomenon. But that being said, it's not just that he has no NFL coaching experience. Dude, he played with some of these guys. I mean, I know Zach Martin might retire or move on or whatever. I know Jamarcus Lawrence, but how weird is it that two of the options who are in the running, so to speak, to be the next head coach of the team that Dak Prescott plays quarterback for, whether you like Dak or not, look at this list. This list features Kellen Moore and Jason Witten, the same Kellen Moore who was Dak Prescott's backup. That dude was on the sidelines when Dak Prescott was out there throwing touchdowns to Jason Witten. I mean, get an adult in the room, relatively speaking, contextually speaking. I don't mean to say or imply that Witten or Moore aren't adults or aren't mature or haven't, done a phenomenal job at the jobs and posts that they've currently held. But again, these dudes were on the team like 5 minutes ago. It's ridiculous. I mean, and think about, again, whether you are pro or anti-Dak, I'm certainly not here to relitigate that conversation or fight that fight right now because we have too many things going on to worry about that one. But that being said, you're Dak Prescott, and you look at, let's just look at Jared Goff within the division, right? Let's look at Jared Goff. His team went out, the Detroit Lions. They said, we're going to get you a head coach in Dan Campbell. We're going to get you a guy in Ben Johnson, one of these young offensive whiz kids. We're going to get you a defensive coordinator in Aaron Glenn. We're going to do all these things to help you and make your life easier. Imagine if they told Jared Goff, like, hey, dude, we're going to go get Todd Gurley to be your offensive coordinator. He'd be like, what the hell? He'd be like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Like, imagine if Jason Kelce had just become the Eagles offensive coordinator instead of being on every single show these days, right? Like, it would not be cool. It would not be smart. It would not make sense. There's a reason that these coaches are in the coaching profession and have been for some time. That isn't an ageist comment. That isn't saying that you have to have some sort of years served or some sort of tenure as a prerequisite to come have this job. But maybe, just maybe, somebody who wasn't in the building in the last 5 years could be of service to you, right? Like, that's just all I'm kind of begging the Cowboys to understand. There is some chat on the YouTube side of things about Robert Saleh. I would not really love that at all, to be honest with you, but I still think that that's a better option than the names that we've been talking about here, because at the very least, he's an adult in the room. Again, relatively speaking, I don't mean that with any ill will or any kind of tongue-in-cheekness against Jason Witten or Kellen Moore or anybody for that matter. But that being said, Robert Saleh, miss me with. I think a perfect world, a perfect kind of world is you somehow, if we put this back up here again, because Robert Saleh is not on the list. If you ask me for my fever dream, right? If you ask me for, like, the genie comes in, says you get 3 wishes, right? And number 1 is infinite Chipotle for me. Whatever, wherever I'm at, I can just snap my fingers and have Chipotle. It's not an ad. I just really like Chipotle. That being said, that's wish number 1. Wish number 2 is Ben Johnson as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I would love for the Dallas Cowboys to do it. Be brave, be bold, be cunning, roll the dice, be innovative, be new, be fresh. Don't go with just the people that you know. This friends and family discount thing is not working out for you if that isn't overwhelmingly obvious by this point in time. And so, to get back, I see you, the other underscore AJ says Infinite Panda Express. I could get on board with that as well. And so as long as we're building out the fever dream, I've got my second wish in the books. Third wish, and I'm being really noble here for all of us involved here, not just being selfish here. Third wish is Robert Saleh as defensive coordinator. We are all pissed. I mean, we are all fed up with this team. I would even go as far as saying that there's a lot of us or a lot of you who hate this team, right? Like, we consider it a curse to be a Dallas Cowboys fan at this point in time. Thank God for me that I've got Arizona State. Thank God for you that you have, I don't know, whatever other team you support. Maybe, I hope that you have a team that you can feel some semblance of pride in. I've mentioned Arizona State in all of my streams, and I say that because when we lost the Peach Bowl, granted it was very painful, but do you know how alive I felt? Do you know how wonderful it was to live and die with a team that was trying its damnedest and doing everything it could to win? It was a wonderful feeling. I haven't felt that in forever relative to the Dallas Cowboys. But if you go get Ben Johnson, if you bring in Robert Saleh, as pissed as we are, as down on you as we feel these days, I'm not saying that we'll come back, but we will open that door. We will unlock it. We will give you our side eye. We will consider getting back on the horse. We will think about saying the way everybody thinks that we do, even though we don't. This is our year. If you go get Ben Johnson, if you go get Robert Saleh, we will believe you when you tell us that your priority is winning games. But if you go out, you just get Kellen Moore, you even get Deion Sanders, and God forbid you get Jason Witten. And again, nothing against him specifically as a person. I admire him greatly. But if you go do that, you are flashing a neon sign, just, smoke signal level, piece of attention. We are just here to make money. We are just here for a good time. We just want people who will say yes to us. That is what you will tell us if you do any one of these predictable things. I will still not really get on board if it's a Pete Carroll or if it's a Brian Flores or an Aaron Glenn. I'll feel better than I would. But the reality is that we have had to begin our pre-coping stage and saying, I guess I'd be okay with Aaron Glenn because they're considering Jason Witten. Think about that. I mean, think about how low of a place we have reached as Dallas Cowboys fans that we're like, well, that guy's not Jason Witten. This guy's not Kellen Moore. That's not Deion Sanders. So I guess by the process of elimination, this is the best option that we could possibly ultimately do for our favorite football team. I digress. I rest my case. My name is RJ Ochoa. If you like what I do, you think I'm cool or interesting or funny, or you just like my content relative to the Dallas Cowboys, you can hit me up on social media. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at RJ Ochoa. I don't know what's happening with TikTok. I'm a little out of the loop on this. So if somebody can catch me up, I would really just genuinely appreciate that. If it's still a thing, I'm there, rj.ochoa. You can check out content from me each and every single day. Obviously, if you're here in the Bleacher Report app, you can follow me here. You can see all the teams that I root for, including the Arizona State Sun Devils. If you follow me or if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you obviously get all of our videos over there. So make sure you subscribe on the blog on the boys side of things. I'm glad that the live functionality operation is working on YouTube. I know we had some issues with that. But again, for anyone who is unaware, whether you are on Bleacher Report or YouTube, every Tuesday, every Thursday, all year long, not just the offseason, not just the head coaching cycle, not just until the combine, all year long. All year long. That includes the regular season. All year long, I will be here every Tuesday, every Thursday, 6 p.m. Central Time. Obviously, if you can watch live, that's great. We can interact in the comment section the way we were at this particular discussion. But if you can't watch live, you can catch the rewatch on demand on both the Bleacher Report app and also obviously on the Blog on the Boys YouTube channel. But that is all I have for you this evening. I hope you enjoy TGL LA Golf Club. Let's get it done. Yeah, I bid you all adieu. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thanks so much for hanging out. See you next time.